The night that changed everything did not announce itself with ceremony. It arrived the way most catastrophes do, quietly, then all at once. At nearly midnight, on the 1st of November 1981, a motorcycle screamed to a halt on the cobblestones of Godric's Hollow. The man who climbed off it stood for a moment staring at what had once been a house, a home, a place where people he loved had eaten breakfast and argued about nothing and put a baby to sleep each night. Now it was wreckage. The upper floor had caved in on itself. The door hung sideways from a single hinge, and even from the street, even before he crossed the threshold, Sirius Black could see the green residue of dark magic still clinging to the ruined walls like something alive. He ran, through the broken door, over splintered wood and plaster dust, past a wand lying on the stairs, small and still and useless. He nearly tripped over it, caught himself, kept going. And then he saw James. James Potter was lying in the entrance hall with his glasses askew and his face frozen in an expression that Sirius had never seen on him before, not in all the years they'd been friends, through school and war and everything in between. James had always looked like he was about to laugh, or had just stopped laughing, or was planning something that would make everyone else laugh eventually. He didn't look like that now. He looked like a man who had been running toward something and hadn't made it. He was 21 years old. Sirius didn't check for a pulse. There are some things you know without checking, and this was one of them. He sank to his knees on the floor beside his best friend, his brother, in all the ways that mattered even if they shared no blood, and for a moment he simply could not function. The war was over. That was what everyone had been saying. Voldemort was gone. They'd finally, after years of loss and fear and exhaustion, actually won. Except they hadn't. Or if they had, the price of winning was James Potter dead on his own floor, trying to reach his family. Then Sirius heard something that pulled him back from the edge of wherever he'd been about to fall. A baby, crying upstairs. He took the stairs 3 at a time. The nursery door had been blasted clean off its hinges. Inside, surrounded by debris and dust and the lingering smell of dark magic, Lily Potter lay on the floor in front of the crib, her red hair spread out around her like something from a painting. She had died, Sirius understood, putting herself between the worst thing in the world and the thing she loved most. In the crib, alive and screaming and furious about all of it, was Harry. He was small for 15 months, with an extraordinary amount of black hair that went in every direction at once and eyes the color of new leaves. Those eyes. Sirius felt the breath go out of him all over again. Those were Lily's eyes exactly, the green of them, precise and impossible to look at without feeling the loss of her all over again. He lifted Harry out of the crib with hands that would not stop shaking. The baby clutched at his leather jacket immediately, the way babies do when they find something solid to hold on to, and screamed harder at first, then gradually less. Sirius pressed him close and said the only thing he could think to say. "I've got you. I've got you, Harry. You're safe." The sound of another motorcycle approaching. Heavy footsteps on the path outside. Sirius turned, wand out, putting himself between Harry and the door before he'd even consciously decided to do it. But it was Hagrid who filled the doorway. Enormous, red-eyed, his face wet with grief, and his hands wringing each other like he wasn't sure what else to do with them. "Sirius." Hagrid's voice broke on the word. "Oh, Sirius, I'm so sorry. Dumbledore sent me. I'm here to take Harry somewhere safe. He's safe with me. He needs to go to his aunt, his mother's sister. There's blood magic, protections that'll keep him safe as long as he can call her house home. Dumbledore's orders." Sirius looked down at Harry. The baby had stopped screaming. He was staring up at Sirius with those green eyes, fully present and somehow already trusting, one small fist wrapped around the lapel of Sirius's jacket. James and Lily's son. The child they had made Sirius godfather to, the child they had trusted to him specifically because they'd believed, with a particular faith of people who know someone deeply, that he would do right by him. Something settled into place inside Sirius Black in that moment. Not a decision, exactly. More like a recognition of what had always been true. James named me his guardian, Sirius said. His voice had gone very quiet. He and Lily wanted me to raise Harry if anything ever happened to them. That's in their will, Hagrid. It's legally binding. Harry stays with me. But Dumbledore said, I don't care what Dumbledore said. There was no anger in it, just certainty, the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice. Peter betrayed them. He was the secret keeper, not me. He sold James and Lily to Voldemort, and when I find him, I will make him answer for that. But not tonight. Tonight, Harry needs someone who loves him. Someone who will make sure he grows up knowing who his parents were. Hagrid's face crumpled. He looked like a man being asked to argue against gravity. Sirius, you're in shock. You're not thinking straight. Let me take the boy to Dumbledore, and we'll sort it all out properly. No. Sirius held Harry tighter. I'm his godfather. I'm taking him home. Where's home? You've got a flat the size of a broom cupboard. Then I'll find somewhere bigger. They stared at each other. Hagrid had 3 times Sirius's mass and could have ended the standoff physically without much effort, but Sirius was an Aurora, a combat veteran of a war that had lasted years. And he had his wand drawn, and more than any of that, he had the particular look of someone who had already decided and was not going to be undecided by anything short of death. After a long moment, Hagrid sighed from somewhere deep in his enormous chest. You'll need to talk to Dumbledore. I'll talk to whoever I need to talk to. But Harry comes with me. 3 hours later, Sirius sat in Dumbledore's office at Hogwarts, with Harry asleep in the crook of his arm. The baby had worn himself out crying somewhere between Godric's Hollow and the castle, and now slept with his thumb in his mouth and his other hand fisted in Sirius's shirt. Anchored. The lightning bolt cut on his forehead had stopped bleeding, but was already becoming a scar, the edges clean and strange in a way that suggested it hadn't been made by anything ordinary. Dumbledore sat across from him, looking older than Sirius had ever seen him look, and Dumbledore had always looked old. The portraits on the walls made a show of sleeping. Fawkes the Phoenix sang one soft and mournful note, and then went quiet. Sirius, Dumbledore began, his voice carrying all its usual gentleness. I understand that you're grieving. We all are. James and Lily were. Don't. The word came out rough. Don't tell me what they were. I knew them better than anyone. Then you know they would want Harry protected above everything else. Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. Lily's sacrifice created something powerful. Blood magic. As long as Harry can call his aunt's home his own, that magic will protect him from Voldemort's remaining followers, from anyone who means him harm. He's vulnerable anyway. He's a baby. He's the boy who survived the killing curse. Voldemort is weakened, perhaps gone, but his followers remain. They'll want revenge. They'll want to eliminate the threat Harry represents. The blood wards are the only protection strong enough. Dumbledore's blue eyes settled on Sirius, with the particular weight of a man who had lived long enough to know exactly what he was doing. You are 21 years old. You have been at war since you left school. You live alone in a single room. You have no experience with children. And you have just experienced a trauma that would collapse most people entirely. I'm not questioning your love for Harry. I'm questioning whether love alone is sufficient. Sirius looked down at the baby in his arms. Harry's face was James's face, the same bone structure, the same hair that would never lie flat regardless of what you did to it. But the eyes, when they were open, were Lily's, both of them, caught in this one small, impossible person. Do you know what James said to me when he asked me to be Harry's godfather? Sirius said quietly. He said if anything happens to us, I need to know Harry will be with someone who will tell him about his parents. Someone who will make sure he knows he comes from brave people who loved him. He paused. That's what James wanted. Not for Harry to grow up with Lily's sister, who hated everything about magic. With me. Petunia Dursley is Harry's blood relative. That matters. Does it? My blood relatives burned me off the family tree for being sorted into Gryffindor. Andromeda Tonks was cast out for marrying a Muggle-born. Blood doesn't make family, Dumbledore. Choice does, and I'm choosing Harry. I'm choosing to be his father because that's what James and Lily wanted. The blood wards can go to hell. I'll ward whatever house we live in myself. I'll make myself the secret keeper if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes, but I will not hand him to people who will hate him for existing. The silence stretched out long and heavy. When Dumbledore finally spoke, his voice had changed. The gentleness was still there, but underneath it something that sounded like resignation. You're determined. Yes. Then I cannot stop you. James and Lily named you guardian in their will. You have the legal right. He paused, but serious. If you take this path, you accept everything that comes with it. Harry will be a target. He will grow up knowing there are people who want him dead. And if something happens to him because those blood wards weren't there, I know. Do you? Or are you making this choice out of grief and guilt? Sirius met his eyes. Both, he said honestly. I suggested they switch secret keepers. I thought I was being clever. I thought I was too obvious a choice, and Peter was too boring a one for anyone to suspect. That decision killed them. His jaw tightened. The least I can do is make sure their son grows up, knowing he was loved. That he came from people worth remembering. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed and stood. Very well. Take Harry. Raise him. Love him. But know this, Voldemort will return. The prophecy remains unfulfilled. When that day comes, Harry will need to be ready. Not sheltered, not coddled, ready. He'll be ready. I'll make sure of it. See that you do. Dumbledore moved toward the window. You'll need a suitable home. Grimmauld Place, perhaps. Sirius's jaw tightened at the name. 12 Grimmauld Place, the ancestral Black family home. The place he'd run from at 16, full of dark artifacts and portraits of dead relatives who'd hated everything he was. But it was large, it was defensible, and it was legally his since his mother's death. I'll make it work, he said. He almost didn't make it out of Hogwarts before the Ministry arrived. 4 auras, with Bartemius Crouch Sr. at their head, intercepted Sirius in the entrance hall. Harry was still asleep in his arms. Sirius Black. Crouch's voice was the temperature of deep winter. You are under arrest for the murders of James and Lily Potter, for the murder of Peter Pettigrew, and for the deaths of 12 Muggles. Surrender your wand. Sirius stared at him. What? Peter Pettigrew is dead. You hunted him down in a Muggle street and destroyed him with a curse. Witnesses heard you laughing over what was left of him. 12 bystanders died in the blast. I haven't hunted Peter down. I've been here at Hogwarts for the last 3 hours. He's dead. He can't be. If he's dead, he killed himself to frame me. That's exactly the kind of... Sirius stopped, reorganized his thoughts. I wasn't the secret keeper. We switched. Peter was. He betrayed James and Lily, and then he faked his death to make it look like I'd killed him. A convenient story. It's the truth. Ask Dumbledore. He was with me. I am, in fact, standing right here. Dumbledore descended the stairs behind them, with the calm of a man who had never once been in a hurry. And I can confirm that Sirius has been in my office for the past 3 hours. The timeline makes your accusation impossible. Crouch's expression flickered. He could have killed Pettigrew before coming here. Peter Pettigrew, Sirius said, forcing each word out carefully, is an unregistered animagus. He transforms into a rat. He could have cut off his own finger, caused enough of an explosion to destroy evidence and kill witnesses, and disappeared. It is precisely the kind of cowardly trick he would pull. The silence that followed had a different quality to it, not dismissive, but uncertain. Give him veritaserum, Dumbledore said quietly. If he's lying, the truth serum will expose him. If he's telling the truth, you'll need to be looking for Pettigrew instead of imprisoning the wrong man. That's the only fair resolution. The auras exchanged glances. Crouch looked like he'd bitten into something sour, but the political calculus was obvious even to him. If he refused veritaserum for a high-profile suspect with a respected witness vouching for him, and it later emerged that the suspect was innocent, the consequences would be severe. Very well, Crouch said stiffly. We'll administer the serum. But Black, if you're guilty, you'll wish we'd taken you directly to Azkaban. You won't find what you're looking for, Sirius said. Because I'm not lying. The interrogation room at the ministry was small and cold and smelled of old stone. Sirius sat in a hard chair with 3 drops of truth serum on his tongue, and Remus Lupin, who had appeared at the ministry an hour ago, grey-faced and shaking, and refused to leave, holding Harry in the corner. The serum worked quickly. His eyes went slightly unfocused. The tension left his face. State your name. Sirius Orion Black. Were you the secret keeper for James and Lily Potter? No. The court scribe's quill scratched steadily across parchment. Who was? Peter Pettigrew. Why did you switch? I suggested it. I was the obvious choice. Everyone knew James and I were close. I thought no one would suspect Peter. I thought I was being clever. His voice cracked, even under the serum's flattening effect. I was wrong. Did you betray the Potters to Lord Voldemort? No, never. James was my brother. I would have died for him. For both of them. Did you kill Peter Pettigrew? No. I haven't seen Peter since October 31st, when he disappeared after betraying James and Lily. Crouch leaned forward. Do you believe Peter Pettigrew is alive? Yes. He faked his death. He's an animagus, an unregistered rat. He cut off his own finger, caused an explosion to destroy the evidence and the witnesses, and vanished. It's exactly what a coward like him would do. The interrogation continued for another hour. Crouch asked every question he could construct. Sirius answered each one with the kind of immediate, unguarded honesty that Veritaserum produced, and that occlumency, as the lead Auror carefully noted, would have disrupted. There was no hesitation, no confusion, no sign of resistance. When the serum wore off and Sirius slumped in his chair, wrung out and exhausted, Crouch stood silently for a long moment. Then he said quietly and as though it cost him something, "Release him." He pointed one finger. "You are not cleared. You're a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. You will remain available for further questioning. You will not leave the country." "Fine," Sirius said hoarsely. "I'll be wherever Harry is." 2 days later, Sirius stood in the entrance hall of 12 Grimmauld Place, with Harry on his hip and Remus Lupin beside him. The house looked exactly as he remembered. Dark, oppressive, smelling of dust and old magic and the specific kind of righteous misery that had been cultivated over generations by people who believed their suffering was a mark of their superiority. The portrait of his mother, Wahlburger Black, glared down at them from the wall. Sirius had already cast a permanent silencing charm on it, but the way her painted face worked and twisted suggested she had plenty to say anyway. "This is it," Sirius said. "The ancestral Black family home. Every square inch of it was designed to remind you that pure-blood wizards are superior to everyone else who exists. Welcome." Remus looked around the gloomy entrance hall with the careful expression of a man choosing his words thoughtfully. "It's atmospheric. It's a nightmare, but it's large, it's defensible, and it's mine now that my mother is dead." Sirius shifted Harry to his other hip. "We'll gut it. Clear out the artifacts. Paint over the family tree. Possibly burn that portrait once I figure out how to get it off the wall." The portrait, apparently detecting that someone was discussing it despite the silencing charm, suddenly broke through with a screech. Blood traitors and half-breeds, and shame on the noble house of Black. Before Sirius flicked his wand and the heavy velvet curtain slammed shut over it, muffling her to a dull and distant howl. She does that, he said, to no one in particular. Creature, he called out. Come here. The house elf appeared with a sharp crack. He was ancient, with enormous bat-like ears and a drooping grey moustache and the deeply ingrained expression of someone who had been offended by existence itself for several decades. He wore a filthy pillowcase and muttered something under his breath that included the words ill-gotten and disgrace and mistress would be spinning. Creature, Sirius said flatly. New rules. You will not insult Harry. You will not insult any guest I bring into this house. You will clean this place from top to bottom and make it safe and suitable for a child. You will dispose of any dark artifacts that could cause harm, and yes, that includes whatever cursed jewelry my mother kept in the cabinet. Are we clear? Creature's face contorted through several expressions. Hatred, resentment, the deep constitutional fury of a creature forced by magic to obey someone it despised, before settling on a thin, poisonous yes. Master Sirius, start with my old bedroom. Turn it into a nursery. Nothing dark, nothing dangerous, just safe. He disappeared with a crack that managed to convey contempt despite being entirely nonverbal. Remus watched him go. That's going to be a problem. Everything about this house is a problem. Sirius looked at Remus. You're staying, aren't you? You haven't said it out loud, but you've been here for 2 days, so I assume. Remus's voice was quiet. James and Lily were my friends too. I spent 12 years thinking you'd betrayed them. When I found out the truth, I realized I'd lost 3 people I loved in one night and spent over a decade believing a lie about the 4th. He paused. If you think I'm leaving you alone to do this, you're out of your mind. I don't know what I'm doing, Sirius admitted. It cost him something to say it. I've barely held a baby before Harry. I don't know when he sleeps, or what he eats, or how to. Mooney, I'm genuinely terrified I'm going to break him. You won't break him. We'll figure it out as we go. Harry, as if he'd been listening and had decided this was the precise moment to insert himself into the conversation, grabbed a fistful of Sirius's hair and pulled as hard as his small hands could manage. Sirius yelped. Remus laughed. A real laugh, the first genuine one either of them had produced since Halloween, and reached over to gently detach the baby's grip. Come on, Remus said. Let's find the kitchen and see if there's anything a 15-month-old can eat. There won't be. My mother considered food a moral weakness. We're getting takeaway. You cannot feed a baby takeaway. Why not? Babies eat food. Takeaway is food. Serious. Fine. We'll go to a Muggle grocery store and buy whatever baby food is. How hard can it be? Remus looked at him with the expression of a man who had learned, through long experience, not to answer that question. 3 weeks later, Sirius Black had a much clearer understanding of how hard it could be. Harry was, by any reasonable measure, an easy baby. He didn't cry excessively. He slept in stretches that were at least survivable. He ate without drama. But he was still a baby, which meant he was a small creature with no concept of adult schedules who required constant supervision, feeding every few hours, regular changes, and someone to hold him when he decided that not being held was unacceptable. Sirius had fought Death Eaters. He had survived years of active combat in the worst war the wizarding world had seen in living memory. None of it had prepared him for the specific, grinding exhaustion of keeping a 15-month-old alive. Mooney. His voice floated down the stairs at 3 in the morning. Mooney, I need help. He won't stop crying. Remus appeared in the nursery doorway looking precisely as tired as Sirius felt. They had divided the nighttime wakings between them, but Harry seemed to have developed an instinct for choosing the nights when they were both already running on empty. What's wrong with him? I changed him. I fed him. I checked his temperature. I checked if he was too warm, too cold. He just keeps crying. Remus crossed the room, took Harry from Sirius's arms, and did a quick assessment with the calm efficiency of someone who had done the reading. He's teething. Look, his gums are swollen. He needs something cold to bite on. How do you know that? I read the baby books you bought and then left on the shelf. I didn't leave them. I skimmed them. Skimming is not reading. Remus headed for the kitchen. Come on. There's a teething ring in the freezer and infant pain potion in the cabinet. Sirius followed, dragging his hands through his hair. I'm a terrible father. You're a new father. They're different things. James would have known what to do. Remus stopped in the kitchen doorway and turned to look at him, and there was something in his expression that was gentle and honest at the same time, the way only the truth delivered kindly can be. James would have panicked exactly the way you did. Fatherhood wasn't something he had the chance to practice. The words landed with the particular weight of true things, because they were. James Potter had been dead for 3 weeks. His son was growing up without him, and every day Sirius looked at Harry. He saw James staring back at him, and he didn't know whether that was a comfort or another wound to carry. In the kitchen, Remus prepared the teething ring and measured out a small dose of pain potion. Harry stopped crying within minutes, gnawing on the cold rubber with obvious focused relief. How did parents ever manage this? Sirius said, dropping into a chair. Most parents have more preparation time. Remus sat across from him. Harry contentedly settled in his lap. And more sleep. And usually they haven't just spent years in a war. He paused. Sirius, you're doing fine. Harry is healthy, safe, and loved. That's what matters. Is it enough? It has to be. It's what we have to give. The kitchen was quiet for a while, just the soft sound of Harry working at the teething ring with determined concentration. I want to tell him about them, Sirius said eventually. About James and Lily. But how do you explain to a baby? How do you ever explain it? That his parents died saving him? That they loved him enough for that to be a choice they made willingly? He looked at the table. How do I make sure he knows who they were? You start now, Remus said simply. You tell him stories. You show him photographs. You make James and Lily real for him. Not abstractions, not martyrs, but people. And when he's old enough to hold the full truth, you give him all of it, including the hard parts. The hard parts. The mistakes, Peter's betrayal, your guilt and mine, and everything we got wrong. Because Harry deserves the truth more than he deserves a version of history that's been smoothed over to make it easier. Remus looked at him steadily. Honesty is what you can give him that no one else can. An honest account of where he came from. Sirius looked at Harry. The baby had fallen asleep again, the teething ring still loosely held in his small fist. His face utterly relaxed, that impossible black hair sticking up in all directions. James's hair, the hair that had never, in all the years Sirius had known James Potter, agreed to lie flat. All right, Sirius said quietly. We'll tell him everything. When he's ready. When he's ready, Remus agreed. Harry's first word was pooh, his enthusiastic attempt at Padfoot, which was Sirius's animagus nickname, and apparently the word he encountered most often. Sirius cried. Remus took photographs. Harry, unaware that he had just caused an emotional event, went back to chewing his toy broomstick. The toy broomstick had been Sirius's first major purchase after they moved into Grimmauld Place. A small racing broom sized for a toddler that hovered at roughly knee height and had been engineered to be incapable of collisions. Remus had argued that Harry was too young. Sirius had countered that there was no such thing as too young to learn to fly. Harry had settled the debate by immediately and obviously adoring it. By 18 months, he could zoom around the drawing room in a series of low, looping circuits, shrieking with laughter while Sirius chased him in his dog form, a great black shape scrambling across the rugs. And Remus sat in the armchair trying to read, and failing because it was impossible to concentrate when something that joyful was happening in the same room. By 2 years old, Harry was doing loop-de-loops, small ones technically, but loop-de-loops. He's a natural, Sirius said, watching him execute a tight turn around the corner of the bookcase, with his tongue stuck out in concentration. James would be so proud. James would be terrified, Remus said. You're teaching him to be reckless. I'm teaching him to be brave. There's a difference. Is there, in this context? Absolutely. Bravery is calculated risk. Recklessness is no calculation at all. Remus looked at him over his book. And which one are you actually teaching him? Sirius grinned. Both. He's a marauder's son. He needs to know how to push limits. Bye. The marauder legacy was present in everything during Harry's early childhood. It was in the stories Sirius told him about James Potter, the troublemaker, the Quidditch star, the boy who had welcomed a runaway from the worst family in Wizarding Britain and given him a second one without ever making it feel like charity. It was in the stories about Lily Evans Potter, who had seen through James's considerable arrogance to the person underneath, and had joined the Order of the Phoenix straight out of school, and had given her life for her son, without, as far as anyone could tell, a moment's hesitation. It was in the photographs Sirius spread out on the drawing-room floor. James and Lily at their wedding, radiant and laughing, looking like people who couldn't quite believe their luck. James holding baby Harry in the hospital, terror and wonder in equal measure on his face. Lily caught mid-laugh by whoever was holding the camera, her red hair lit up like something burning in a good way. And the four marauders at Hogwarts, arms around each other, grinning like they owned the future. Sirius always paused on those photographs, particularly on the fourth face. Peter Pettigrew, round-faced, cheerful, looking like everyone's harmless and somewhat forgettable friend. The traitor who had sold James and Lily to Voldemort. The coward who had faked his own death and vanished. Who's that one? Harry asked once, at 3 years old, pointing at Peter's face with the directness that very young children deploy before they learn that some questions are complicated. That's Peter, Sirius said carefully. He was our friend once. But he did something very bad. He's gone now. Bad like the bad wizard? Harry knew about Voldemort in the way 3-year-olds can know about things, the broad shape of it, not the detail. A bad wizard who had hurt his parents. A bad wizard who was gone but might return someday. Sirius had decided early that softening it too much would only create larger problems later when the full version emerged, as it inevitably would. Yes, Sirius said, bad like the bad wizard. Peter helped him hurt people. Harry thought about this with the serious expression of someone processing new information carefully. I'm glad he's gone. Me too, pup. Me too. But Peter wasn't gone. Somewhere, in some form, in the body of a small brown rat, Peter Pettigrew was hiding and waiting. Sirius knew it with a certainty that lived in his chest like a stone. And sometimes late at night, when Harry was asleep and the house was quiet, he lay awake turning it over, where Peter was, what he was planning, how it would eventually go when Sirius found him. Because he would find him. That was not in question. The only question was when. By the time Harry was 4 years old, 12 Grimmauld Place had become something its original builders would not have recognized, and almost certainly would have hated, which Sirius considered a significant improvement. The dark artifacts were gone. It had taken the better part of a year to clear them all out. Cursed jewelry that caused boils, a music box that induced a sleep you didn't wake from, books that bit, books that screamed, books that tried to read you instead of the other way around. They'd catalogued everything, disposed of what was dangerous, donated what was merely unpleasant to the Department of Magical Artifacts for study. The drawing room, once a shrine to pure-blood ideology and general grimness, had been taken over by Harry's toys. The kitchen had been modernized with Muggle appliances that Harry found fascinating and Creature regarded as a personal insult. Sirius's old childhood bedroom on the second floor remained mostly as he'd left it at 16, a monument to adolescent rebellion, with posters of Muggle motorcycles and Gryffindor banners covering the walls, and some photographs he kept meaning to take down. He never got around to it. There was something he couldn't quite bring himself to erase about the room where a younger version of himself had figured out who he was going to be. The portrait of Walburga Black remained the one problem without a clean solution. He'd tried removing it. The permanent, sticking charm she'd applied was stronger than anything he'd managed to counter, and he'd tried everything he could think of. In the end, he'd commissioned a set of heavy velvet curtains, thick enough to absorb sound, charmed to close the moment she started screaming. It wasn't perfect. When she really worked herself up, you could still hear her, a muffled, furious howling from behind the fabric, but it was manageable. Harry had learned to manage it, too, when the portrait broke through and screamed at him about blood traitors and degenerates and the shame he represented to the noble House of Black. Harry would look up from whatever he was doing, regard the curtains with the calm assessment of someone making a reasonable judgment, and say, "You're mean. I don't like you." Then he'd go back to his toys. Sirius had never been more proud of anything in his life. Creature remained a persistent low-grade problem. He followed orders. House elf magic gave him no choice, but he followed them with the muttering, resentful energy of someone who wanted you to know exactly how he felt about the situation. Master Sirius brings shame on the noble house. Mistress would be appalled. The half-blood and his werewolf guardian in the sacred halls. Creature, Sirius said one morning, interrupting a particularly creative bout of muttering. If you can't say something that isn't an insult about Harry, don't say anything. Creature is saying nothing about the young master, Creature said, with the precise air of someone finding a technicality. Creature is simply observing to himself the general state of disgrace. That's still about Harry. Creature is loyal to the House of Black. Creature serves. The House of Black is going to give you clothes if you don't stop. Creature fell silent with the expression of someone who has just been threatened with something genuinely terrible. The freedom of clothes was the worst thing you could say to a house elf, and both of them knew Sirius hated using it. But some mornings, there was no other lever available. Later, Harry found Sirius in the kitchen and climbed up onto the chair across from him, with the focused effort of a small person who hasn't quite finished growing into their limbs. Why is Creature so mean? Sirius considered the question the way he'd learned to consider all of Harry's questions, directly without talking down to him. Because Harry had shown very early on that he could tell the difference. Because he loved my mother, and my mother was a terrible person who taught him terrible things. Sometimes people get stuck believing wrong things because the person who taught them believed those things first. But you don't believe wrong things. I try not to, but I probably believe some wrong things without knowing it. Everyone does. Harry thought about this with his chin resting on his hands. If I believe wrong things, will you tell me? That's exactly what family is for. Harry seemed satisfied with this. He slid off the chair and went back to whatever he'd been doing. Remus, who had been reading the prophet at the other end of the table, looked up. You're getting better at this. Parenting. You used to panic about the crying. Now you explain moral epistemology to him over breakfast. He stopped being a crying baby and started being a small person with opinions. It's much easier to handle opinions. Sirius poured himself more tea. Don't tell me it gets harder. One disaster at a time, Mooney. When Harry was 7, the education became more formal. Not spellwork. Harry was years away from a wand, and Sirius wasn't about to encourage uncontrolled underage magic in a house that still had structurally questionable walls. But magical theory, wizarding history, the architecture of how spells worked and why, the political landscape of the world Harry would eventually step into. Sirius had opinions about all of it and shared them without apology, which was perhaps not the most balanced pedagogical approach, but was at least honest. The most important thing, he said one afternoon, the two of them sitting on the drawing room floor with books spread between them, is that magical ability has nothing to do with blood. Some of the most powerful witches and wizards in history were Muggle-born. Your mother was Muggle-born. She was top of her class at Hogwarts, head girl, one of the best defensive magic practitioners I've ever seen. The magic chose her because the magic does the choosing, not families. Harry nodded, following this carefully. But a lot of wizards, purebloods especially, people who've been magical for generations, have convinced themselves that they're superior. That bloodline is what matters. They use a word, mudblood, as an insult toward Muggleborns. If you ever hear someone use it, you need to understand clearly that they're wrong. Blood doesn't determine worth. It never has. What if someone calls me that? They won't. You're a half-blood. Your father was pure-blood. Your mother Muggle-born. But even if they did, you'd know it for what it is. Ignorance dressed up as pride. Sirius ruffled his hair. The Potters never cared about blood purity. The decent blacks didn't either, and there were a few of us. Now, let's talk about Hogwarts. 4 years until you start, but you should know what you're walking into. The Hogwarts lectures became a regular fixture. Sirius covered the houses, Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and what they traditionally valued, the house point system, Quidditch, the general culture of the castle, the specific culture of its ghosts, which corridors were worth knowing about and which were better avoided, the best hiding spots he could remember, and the particular satisfaction of a well-executed prank. "Which house will I be in?" Harry asked. "Depends on what the sorting hat sees in you. Your dad and I were both Gryffindors. Your mum, too. But houses don't define you. Your choices do. The hat takes your preference into account." "What if I end up in Slytherin?" Sirius paused. It was the kind of question that deserved honesty rather than reassurance. Slytherin has produced brilliant witches and wizards. It's also produced more dark wizards than any other house, which isn't because Slytherins are evil. It's because ambition without a moral compass is a dangerous combination. If you ended up there, I'd be proud of you. Just remember that ambition should serve something larger than yourself. Harry considered this with the focused gravity he brought to most serious topics. "Can we practice dueling now?" "You don't have a wand. You could teach me the movements so I'm ready when I do." Sirius grinned. "That's the marauder spirit. Up you get." By 9, Harry knew more defensive theory than most students learned in their entire first year. He couldn't cast yet, but he understood the mechanics behind shield charms, the principles of disarming the strategic logic of full body binds, the specific vulnerabilities of common offensive spells. He practiced wand movements with a stick and knew the incantations by heart. He could talk through a duel tactically, the way some kids his age talk through Quidditch matches. Remus thought they were pushing too hard. He said so, carefully and more than once. "He's 9, Sirius. He should have some room just to be a child. He plays. He flies, he reads, he causes creature daily anguish. He has a childhood. That's not the same as not being trained for a war. It's not a war yet. No, but you're preparing him for one." Remus's voice was measured, not accusatory. "There's a difference between giving a child the tools to protect himself and raising him to expect to fight. Voldemort isn't gone." Sirius said it plainly, without drama. "You know it, and I know it. He's somewhere, in some form, and when he finds a way back, Harry will be in his path. I'd rather Harry be ready and the war never come, than the war come and Harry not be ready." Remus looked out the window at Harry, who was on his toy broom in the garden, performing increasingly ambitious maneuvers between the rose bushes, while laughing at something only he could hear. Still a child, unmistakably still a child. He didn't argue further. Because Sirius was right, and both of them knew it, and knowing it didn't make it easier to watch. August 24th, 1991. Harry Potter was 11 years old, and the owl arrived at breakfast. It was a small bird, clearly not used to dramatic entrances. That swooped through the kitchen window and dropped the envelope directly onto Harry's plate, with the air of something that had accomplished its one job and was now ready to leave. Harry had known the letter was coming. Sirius had been telling him about it for years, but holding the actual thing, feeling the weight of the heavy parchment and the Hogwarts seal beneath his fingers, made it real in a way the anticipation hadn't. He looked up at Sirius and Remus, both of whom were making remarkable and entirely unsuccessful attempts to look casual. "Open it," Sirius said. Harry broke the seal. "Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." He looked up. "I'm going to Hogwarts." "You're going to Hogwarts," Sirius confirmed. His voice had gone rough at the edges. "Just like your dad. Just like all of us. Are you going to cry?" "No. Shut up. I have something in my eye." Remus smiled across the table. "We should go to Diagon Alley tomorrow. Books, robes, your wand." "My wand," Harry repeated, with the particular weight someone gives a word they've been waiting a long time to say. Sirius left the kitchen and came back with a package wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the table in front of Harry without preamble. "I've been saving this." Harry unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather jacket, soft black leather, perfectly sized, with the Potter family crest embroidered on the back in silver thread. It was exactly like the one Sirius wore, just built for someone considerably smaller. "Every marauder needs a leather jacket," Sirius said. "It's tradition." Harry put it on and turned to look at himself in the mirror by the door. He looked, he thought, like someone who belonged to something. Like someone who was part of a story that had been going on before him and would keep going after, and he was the part of it that was happening now. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome. Now, let's plan your Hogwarts strategy. I'm thinking you establish early dominance with a well-placed prank on the Slytherins in your first week." "Absolutely not," Remus said. "First month?" "Harry," Remus said, "do not prank anyone in your first year." "That's completely unrealistic," Sirius said. "The Marauder legacy demands a minimum of 3 good pranks annually. The Marauder legacy is why I spent half my time at Hogwarts in detention. And you loved every minute of it." Remus sighed. Harry grinned. He was going to Hogwarts. He was going to learn real magic. He couldn't wait. Diagon Alley was exactly what it always was: chaotic, loud, strange, wonderful. But today, it felt different. Today, Harry wasn't visiting. He was shopping for a life. Gringotts first. The goblin at the counter examined Harry with the sharp black eyes of someone who has seen everything and remains unimpressed by most of it. "Mr. Potter, we've been expecting you. Vault 687, I presume. That's my vault. Your parents' vault. Left to you in their will. Quite substantial. Would you like to make a withdrawal?" The cart ride down was everything Sirius had described, plunging through narrow tunnels at speeds that made rational thought temporarily impossible. Corners that defied physics, the smell of deep stone and old money. When the vault opened, Harry stopped breathing. Gold, mountains of it. Galleons piled so high they nearly brushed the ceiling, with silver sickles and bronze knuts filling the gaps between. More wealth than Harry had ever tried to imagine. All of it his because 2 people who had died before he could remember them had loved him enough to plan for a future they wouldn't see. "This is mine," he said very quietly. "Your parents made sure you'd be provided for," the goblin said, with the neutrality of someone who deals in fortunes daily and has learned not to attach sentiment to them. "They were wise investors." Harry filled a bag with enough gold for school supplies and climbed back into the cart, with his mind turning over things he wasn't sure how to think about. He wasn't just Harry Potter, the boy who had survived Voldemort. He was Harry Potter, heir to something. The thought was exciting and strange and carried a weight he hadn't expected. At Madame Malkin's, being fitted for school robes, another boy walked in. Pale, blonde, with the particular posture of someone who has always had money and considers it a personal characteristic rather than a circumstance. He looked at Harry with cool grey eyes. Hogwarts? Yes, me too. First year. My father's next door buying my books. A pause that suggested Harry was supposed to be impressed. I'm Draco Malfoy. Harry had heard the name. Sirius had mentioned the Malfoys, old pureblood family, suspected Death Eaters who'd claimed Imperius after Voldemort's fall. Lucius Malfoy had bought his way out of what should have been a life sentence. Harry Potter, he said, watching. Malfoy's eyes flickered. I heard you were living with Muggles, the Dursleys. You heard wrong. I live with my godfather, Sirius Black. Something shifted in Malfoy's expression, genuine surprise recalibrating. But he's my mother's cousin. That makes us, well, related. Somewhat. Harry hadn't thought about that. Narcissa Malfoy, née Black, was Sirius's first cousin, which made Draco some complicated version of family by extension. Pure blood family trees had a way of folding back on themselves. I suppose it does, Harry said carefully. Father says Sirius Black is a blood traitor who disgraced the House of Black. Malfoy delivered this as pure information, without particular heat. But he also says you're famous, that you defeated you-know-who as a baby. I was 1 year old. I don't remember it. Still. Malfoy's tone carried the particular quality of someone deciding whether a person is worth his time. What house do you think you'll be in? Gryffindor, probably. My parents were both Gryffindors. So was Sirius. Malfoy's expression cooled by several degrees. Gryffindors. He said it the way someone might say a flavor they find distasteful. Well, we'll see at school, I suppose. He left. Harry watched him go, with the feeling of having just failed an audition he hadn't known he was attending. Ollivander's was narrow and dim, with a single wand on a faded cushion in the window, and the smell of wood and something older underneath it. The bell rang somewhere deep in the shop as they entered. Sirius stayed near the door. This was Harry's moment. Good afternoon. The old man materialized from between the shelves as if he'd been there all along. Wide, pale eyes, luminous in the gloom. I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter. You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was here herself. 10 1/4 inches, swishy, willow. A fine wand for charm work. He paused, taking Harry in. Which is your wand arm? What followed was one of the stranger half hours of Harry's life. Ollivander measured him from every possible angle, then began pulling boxes from shelves in a rhythm that seemed based on logic Harry couldn't follow. Beechwood and dragon heartstring, nothing. Maple and phoenix feather, nothing. Ebony and unicorn hair, nothing. Box after box tried and rejected, a growing pile on the spindly chair, Ollivander becoming increasingly animated with each failure, rather than less. Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry. Let's try. Yes. Why not? Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. Nice and supple. Harry took it. He felt the warmth immediately, spreading from the handle up through his fingers, and when he raised it and brought it down, the sparks that shot from the tip were red and gold, spinning off the dusty walls like something celebrating. Oh, bravo. Ollivander's eyes gleamed. Yes, indeed. Very good and very curious. He took the wand back, turned it in his hands. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single one. The phoenix whose tail feather sits in your wand gave another feather. Just one other. And that wand, its brother, gave you that scar. Harry's hand went to his forehead without thinking. 13.5 inches. Ollivander's voice had gone soft and precise. I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. Outside, Harry told Sirius what Ollivander had said about the wands. It means you got a powerful wand, Sirius said. Don't let Ollivander make it into more than that. He loves the drama of wand lore. But Harry couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than that the connection meant something. He filed it away in the part of his mind where he kept things he wasn't ready to think about yet. September the 1st came faster than seemed possible. King's Cross was its usual morning chaos: commuters, pigeons, the smell of diesel and coffee. Harry stood with Sirius and Remus in front of the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, his trunk on a trolley, and Hedwig, his new owl, hooting quietly in her cage. You run straight at it, Sirius said. Don't stop. Don't hesitate. You're sure? Have I ever lied to you about magic? The flu powder. You told me it tasted like chocolate. That was a joke. This is real. Just run. Harry took a breath, gripped the trolley, and ran. The barrier rushed toward him and then dissolved. And he was through, standing on a platform where the air tasted different, and a scarlet steam engine gleamed in the morning light. Platform 9 3/4, the Hogwarts Express. Sirius appeared beside him, grinning. Easy. The platform was crowded. Somewhere near the train, a pair of identical red-haired boys were causing what appeared to be a small magical incident involving something purple and several bystanders' luggage. A girl with an extraordinary quantity of bushy brown hair was organizing her trunk with the focused intensity of someone who had prepared a system and intended to execute it. Sirius talked through it all, and the words came easily. Quidditch, the castle, the food, the ghosts, the particular pleasure of a perfect prank executed without detection. But as the train whistle sounded and the moment actually arrived, his voice went rough. You have everything? Trunk, books, wand? Sirius, I have everything. Right, yes. He ran his hands through his hair, the nervous gesture Harry had inherited from him, without realizing it for years. Harry, Hogwarts is going to be incredible. Best years of my life. You're going to learn magic, make friends, probably get into more trouble than is strictly advisable. You told me to cause trouble. 3 pranks per year. I didn't say get expelled. The grin was slightly unsteady. You're going to be brilliant, just like your dad. What if I'm not? What if I'm terrible at it? You won't be. But even if you were, which you won't be, I'd still be proud of you. He pulled Harry into a hug that lasted longer than either of them had probably planned. I love you, kid. Go show them what a marauder can do. Harry hugged him back, surprised by the burning behind his eyes. I love you too. Remus hugged him next, tighter than expected, briefer, more contained. Be careful, study hard. Send an owl if you need anything at all. The whistle blew again. Harry grabbed his trunk, started towards the train, then stopped and turned. Sirius and Remus stood side by side on the platform, the two people who had built him into who he was. He waved. They waved back. He boarded the Hogwarts Express. He found an empty compartment and watched through the window as the platform slid away. He caught sight of Sirius and Remus in the crowd before the train curved and they disappeared. Sirius was very obviously crying and had stopped making any effort to hide it. The compartment door slid open. A boy with red hair and a satisfying quantity of freckles stuck his head in. Mind if I sit? Everywhere else is rammed. Go ahead. The boy sat down. Ron. Ron Weasley. Harry Potter. Ron's eyes went to Harry's forehead, to the scar just visible beneath his fringe. Blimey. Are you really? Yes, that's... My brothers told me about you. You're the one who... you know. As a baby. I don't remember it. Still, Ron seemed to catch himself. Sorry, my brother said I'd be weird about it. I'm being weird. It's fine. How many brothers do you have? I've got 5, plus one sister who's not old enough yet. Bill and Charlie have already graduated. Percy's just become head boy and won't stop reminding everyone. Then there's the twins, Fred and George. They're the ones who were causing whatever that was on the platform. And then me. He said it with the ease of someone who had long ago made peace with being the 6th of something. What about you? Just me. And my godfather. And Remus, who's sort of... It's complicated. Is your godfather Sirius Black? My dad mentioned him once, said he was a brilliant orator. He was. Now he mostly causes trouble and embarrasses me in public. Ron grinned. Sounds like family. It did, Harry thought. It really did. They talked through the journey, Quidditch houses, what they were hoping to learn, what they were afraid of. Ron was straightforwardly easy to be around, and Harry, who had been slightly worried about the social mechanics of making friends from scratch, found himself relaxing into the conversation without effort. The compartment door opened again. The girl with the bushy hair stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one. No, Harry said. Sorry. We could help look, Ron offered. Her expression shifted. That would be kind. I'm Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, Harry Potter. Hermione's eyes widened. Are you really? I've read about you in several books. You're in modern magical history, and the rise and fall of the dark arts, and at least 2 others. Some of the accounts seemed a bit sensationalized, to be honest. The section about you speaking to the snake at the zoo seemed particularly... Wait, Harry interrupted. I'm in books. Several. You didn't know. I knew I was famous. I didn't know there were books. Of course there are. You're a significant historical figure. She said this as simple fact, without apparent intent to flatter. I'm not sure all the details are accurate, though. The snake incident, especially. The glass disappeared by accident. I wasn't trying to do anything. The snake just... I could hear it talking, and we were having a conversation, and then someone tried to photograph us and the glass vanished, and the snake left. Obviously, accidental magic, Hermione said. Underage wizards can't control their magic before they have wands. It's completely standard. Right, Harry said, already liking her despite the brisk certainty with which she delivered information. Anyone who looked at things logically and followed the evidence was all right by him. Let's go find this toad. The sorting ceremony was everything Sirius had described, and still managed to be more intimidating than the description. The great hall was enormous, ceiling enchanted to show the night sky, thousands of candles floating without visible means of support, 4 long tables full of students all turned to watch the first years file in. Harry walked with the others and kept his expression neutral and thought about Sirius standing in a line just like this 30 years ago, nervous and pretending not to be. Professor McGonagall placed an old hat on a stool at the front of the hall. It opened a seam that served as a mouth and sang a song about houses and qualities and choices. Then the names began. Hermione went to Gryffindor after almost 4 minutes of the hat apparently arguing with itself. She walked to the table, looking simultaneously relieved and vindicated. Harry gave her a thumbs up. Neville Longbottom went to Gryffindor in a moment so brief the hat barely touched his head. He looked astonished by this. Draco Malfoy swaggered to the stool, and the hat called Slytherin before it had properly settled. Malfoy walked to the Slytherin table with the expression of someone arriving somewhere they had always known they would end up. Potter, Harry. The whisper started the moment his name left McGonagall's lips. He walked to the stool, sat down, and the hat came down over his eyes and plunged him into darkness. Well, well, said a small voice in his ear. Harry Potter, I've been waiting for you. Interesting. Very interesting. Get on with it, Harry thought. Impatient, like your father. The hat sounded amused. Brave, certainly. Loyal to those you love. You'd do well in Gryffindor. But there's more here. Ambition, yes. Real ambition. A deep desire to prove yourself worthy of your legacy. Slytherin would nurture that. No, Harry thought clearly. Not Slytherin. My family spent everything fighting what Slytherin became. Gryffindor. That's where I belong. You know Slytherin isn't inherently dark, just ambitious. Gryffindor, Harry thought again, with the same quiet firmness Sirius used when he decided something. Very well. But I'll tell you this. The choice matters less than you think. It's what you do with it. A pause. Gryffindor. The table erupted. Harry crossed to it grinning, sat down next to Hermione. And when Ron joined them a few minutes later, the three of them looked at each other with the particular satisfaction of people who have ended up in the right place. Dumbledore stood to speak. The usual notices: Forbidden Forest, Magic in Corridors. The sorting ceremony concluded. Then, almost as an aside, I should also mention that the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to all who do not wish to die a very painful death. Ron leaned over. He's joking, right? Harry thought about all the stories Sirius had told him about Dumbledore. I don't think he jokes about student safety. Then what's up there? Harry looked at the corridor's general direction, though you couldn't see it from here. Something we're going to find out. Hermione looked alarmed. We are absolutely not. Speak for yourself, Harry said pleasantly. Potions with Professor Snape was worse than Harry had prepared himself for, and he had prepared himself considerably. Sirius had warned him, had sat him down the summer before Hogwarts and explained, with the particular honesty he always brought to difficult subjects, that Severus Snape had hated James Potter with an intensity that had never fully resolved itself into anything healthier, and that Harry, who looked almost exactly like James, would likely bear the weight of that unresolved feeling whether he'd earned it or not. Sirius had told him not to rise to it, had told him that Snape was clever and would be looking for any excuse to punish him, and that the worst thing Harry could do was give him one. Harry had thought he was prepared for this. He was not entirely prepared for this. Snape swept into the dungeon classroom like weather, black robes, cold air, the particular presence of someone who has spent years cultivating the effect of their own entrance. He gave a short speech about the subtle science and exact art of potion making, the kind of speech that would have been genuinely interesting from someone who wasn't simultaneously scanning the room for a specific target. Then his eyes landed on Harry, and something in his expression did a thing that Sirius had warned him about, and that was still unpleasant to be on the receiving end of. Potter. The voice was soft, deliberately soft in a way that meant the opposite of gentle. Our new celebrity. Harry said nothing. Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry knew this one. Sirius had drilled basic potions theory into him for years. Not to show off, but because understanding the underlying chemistry made the practical work easier. The draught of living death. A very powerful sleeping potion. Snape's lip curled. Lucky guess. Where would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar? The stomach of a goat. It's an antidote to most common poisons. What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, also called aconite. The classroom had gone very quiet. Snape looked at Harry with an expression that had moved past dislike into something more considered and therefore more dangerous. 5 points from Gryffindor for cheek, Potter. Thinking you know everything because your godfather filled your head with information doesn't make you special. I wasn't being cheek. Another 5 points for answering back. Harry closed his mouth, caught Hermione's warning look from 2 seats away, and held it closed. This was the trap Sirius had described. Not a test of knowledge, but of self-control, and Snape was good at setting it. The rest of the lesson was a masterclass in creative unfairness. Snape criticized Harry's cutting technique, his stirring speed, his ingredient preparation, the angle of his wrist, the distance between his cauldron and his notes. When Neville's potion went wrong and ate through the bottom of his cauldron and spread across the stone floor in a smoking puddle, Snape somehow attributed this to Harry's failure to assist a struggling classmate. 10 points from Gryffindor for Potter's failure to support his peers. I offered to help, Harry said, as levelly as he could manage. Neville wanted to do it himself. That's 20 points. Would you like to try for 30? Harry did not try for 30. He sat with the cold feeling settling in his chest. Not anger exactly, though there was anger underneath it. Something more like the clarity of understanding a situation correctly. Snape wanted a reaction. Snape had structured the entire lesson around the possibility of a reaction. The best thing Harry could do was not give him one. After class, walking away from the dungeons with Ron indignant on his behalf and Hermione looking worried, Harry thought about what Sirius had told him about Snape and Lily. Sirius had mentioned it once, dismissively. Snape's obsession with Lily Evans had been unrequited and a bit pathetic, those were the words. But Harry was starting to understand that dismissiveness wasn't the whole picture. Snape had loved Lily Potter, and Harry had Lily's eyes. Every time Snape looked at him, he was looking at the face of James Potter, the man he'd hated, combined with the eyes of the woman he'd lost, housed in a child who was alive when she wasn't. It didn't make the treatment acceptable, but it made it comprehensible, which was almost more unsettling. He hates you, Ron said. That's completely mental. You weren't even born when your dad was here. I know, but I look like my dad. That's enough for him. Hermione had caught up with them. Harry, you need to be careful. He's looking for any excuse to dock points and give you detention. I know that too. So you'll be careful. I'll be smart about it, Harry said, which is different from just taking it. Halloween arrived with floating pumpkins and a feast substantial enough to make Ron temporarily lose the ability to speak. Harry was working through a treacle tart when the doors burst open and Professor Quirrell fell through them, looking like a man who had just seen something that had fundamentally revised his understanding of the world. "Troll," he screamed. "Troll in the dungeons. Thought you ought to know." Then he fainted. The great hall erupted. Dumbledore sent everyone back to their common rooms under prefect escort, and Harry followed the surge of Gryffindors for about 30 seconds before he realized that Hermione wasn't among them. He stopped, grabbed Ron's arm. "Where's Hermione?" Ron's face changed. He'd made a careless comment that afternoon, that Hermione was an insufferable know-it-all, that nobody could stand her, and she had heard it and left, and they hadn't seen her since. If she was still in a bathroom somewhere, upset and unaware that there was a troll in the building, they ran. The girls' bathroom on the second floor was on the route toward the dungeons, which meant it was toward the troll, which they decided not to think about too hard. They sprinted through corridors, Harry's heart doing something unpleasant in his chest, and they smelled it before they arrived. The stench of something large and animal and wrong. Harry burst through the bathroom door. The troll was 12 feet of grey muscle and bone-deep stupidity, with a wooden club the size of a small tree, and Hermione pressed against the far wall with her mouth open in a scream that hadn't quite made it out yet. Harry shouted. Something wordless, designed purely to redirect attention. It worked. The troll turned toward him with the slow inexorability of something that has never needed to be quick. Harry grabbed a broken piece of sink from the floor and threw it. The chunk of porcelain bounced off the creature's head without visible effect, but it held the attention. Harry had been trained for situations where you were physically outmatched. The principle was always the same. Don't fight strength with strength. Fight it with speed and environment and the fact that bigger things are often slower things. The troll swung its club. Harry dove sideways, rolled, came up already moving. Wingardium Leviosa. He aimed at the club. The spell caught it, lifting it cleanly out of the troll's grip. The creature stared at its empty hand with the expression of something experiencing genuine philosophical uncertainty. "Hermione, move!" Ron shouted. She unfroze, scrambled sideways. The troll reached for her with one massive hand, and Harry did the only thing that seemed to make sense in the moment. He ran at the troll, jumped onto its back, and shoved his wand as far up one of its enormous nostrils as it would go. The troll roared. It shook its head with the force of something that has been very seriously inconvenienced. Harry held on. The room spun. His grip was sliding. Then Hermione's voice, clear and steady despite everything. "Wingardium Leviosa." The club lifted into the air and came down on the troll's head with a sound like a very large door closing. The creature swayed, looked briefly confused about this new development, and collapsed. Harry jumped clear and landed hard on the bathroom floor. Silence. Then Hermione started laughing, the particular laughter of someone whose body has decided to process extreme fear as hilarity. "You shoved your wand up its nose," she managed. "Harry, you shoved your wand up a troll's nose." It worked. It was the most ridiculous. She stopped laughing and crossed the bathroom and threw her arms around him. "Thank you. Both of you. You saved my life." "You saved us," Ron pointed out. That was brilliant levitation from someone who was just pressed against a wall shaking. I was not. I was momentarily overwhelmed. There's a difference. Professor McGonagall arrived with Snape and Quirrell, looked at the unconscious troll and the three of them standing in the wreckage, and delivered a controlled explosion of precisely targeted disappointment. Then Hermione, to everyone's surprise, including her own, told McGonagall it was her fault. She'd gone looking for the troll herself, having read about them, and if Harry and Ron hadn't found her, she'd be dead. McGonagall's expression shifted through several things and settled somewhere between exasperation and reluctant respect. She docked 5 points from Gryffindor for Hermione's recklessness and awarded 5 each to Harry and Ron for what she called, with magnificent understatement, sheer dumb luck. Walking away from the bathroom afterward, Hermione grabbed both their arms. "Friends?" she asked. It came out slightly more vulnerable than she'd probably intended. "Obviously," Harry said. "You're brilliant, Hermione. A bit bossy, but brilliant." She beamed. Ron looked like he was recalibrating several previous opinions simultaneously. Friends, then. It turned out to be one of the easier decisions Harry made all year. The troll incident raised questions that Harry's brain wouldn't leave alone. Specifically, what was a troll doing in Hogwarts on the one night a year when the whole school was gathered in one place? And why had Snape been limping when he arrived at the bathroom, with what looked very much like a bite taken out of his leg? Harry's natural instinct, inherited from Sirius, who had never met a mystery he didn't immediately want to climb inside, was to investigate. Hermione's natural instinct was caution. Ron wanted to avoid detention. All 3 of them ended up under Harry's invisibility cloak at midnight 3 days later, walking toward the 3rd-floor corridor, which tells you something about the particular gravity of shared secrets. The corridor was dark. The door at the end was locked until Hermione murmured, "Alohomora," and then it wasn't. They stepped through and froze. A 3-headed dog filled the room the way water fills a container, completely, inevitably, leaving no space for anything else. Each head was roughly the size of something that heads should not be the size of. All 3 were sleeping, producing snores that moved the dust on the floor, and beneath the massive paws was a trapdoor. One of the heads twitched. Harry grabbed both of them, and they ran. Back in Gryffindor Tower, breathless and safe, Harry said, "Whatever's under that trapdoor is valuable enough to need a Cerberus guarding it." "A what?" Ron asked. 3-headed dog. Greek mythology. Cerberus guards the entrance to the underworld. Sirius made me read mythology, says obscure knowledge saves lives. Ron looked at him. "Did it?" "Just now. It will eventually." "So what do we do?" Hermione asked. "We find out what's being protected. and we figure out why Snape wants it badly enough to get bitten trying to get past a giant three-headed dog. Gryffindor Quidditch tryouts were a formality. As far as Harry was concerned, though he didn't say this out loud because Sirius had taught him that announcing confidence before proving it was the fastest way to look foolish. He'd been flying since before he could properly remember. Sirius had started him on the toy broom at 18 months and moved him to proper instruction at 7. And by now the mechanics of flight were less something he thought about and more something his body simply did, the way breathing was something his body did. He mounted the school broom, which was inferior to anything he'd flown at home but workable, and when Oliver Wood said, "Show me what you've got," Harry kicked off and showed him. He was in the air for about 3 minutes. He performed a Ronsky feint that made Wood audibly inhale, caught the practice snitch in under 2 minutes, and landed to find the Gryffindor captain staring at him with the expression of someone who has just found something they didn't expect. "Where did you learn to fly like that?" "My godfather. Since I was 7. You're on the team. Seeker. I don't care that you're a first year. When's the first match?" "November. Against Slytherin. I can handle Slytherin." Wood grinned. "That's the spirit." The morning of the first match, a package arrived at breakfast. Harry recognized the handwriting on the note before he'd even unfolded it. "Proms. You're going to be brilliant. I know because I've watched you fly. Remember, speed is your advantage over strength. Use it. Also, what's enclosed belonged to your father. He'd want you to have it. Love, Padfoot. P.S. Remus says be careful and study hard. I say catch the snitch and cause mild chaos." Inside the wrapping was a broomstick that made everyone at the Gryffindor table go quiet. Nimbus 2000. Polished. Perfect. Built for speed. The fastest racing broom currently in production. Ron stared at it with the expression of someone having a religious experience. "That costs a fortune. Sirius must have ordered it the moment I made the team." Harry ran his hand along the handle, feeling the faint hum of the enchantments. His father's sport. His father's position, probably. Sirius's gift. The match itself was everything flying should be. Fast and bright and loud, the crowd and noise beneath him as he circled the pitch, searching. The nimbus responded to thought more than movement. The lightest shift of weight translated instantly into direction and speed. He felt for the length of the match, like something that had been designed for exactly this. Then his broom started trying to throw him off. It happened gradually at first, a bucking motion, a jerk to the left, and then all at once, and with genuine intent, twisting and pitching in ways that no broom behaved naturally. Harry clung to the handle with both hands, his knuckles white, while the crowd below made a sound that had nothing to do with the game anymore. In the stands, Hermione spotted Snape through her binoculars. His lips were moving. His eyes were fixed on Harry's broom, with the focused stillness of a man maintaining something that requires concentration to maintain. She grabbed Ron, pushed through the crowd toward where Snape sat, reached him, and in a moment of improvisation, born of desperation, set his robes on fire with a small directed flame. Snape yelped, jumped up, broke his gaze. Harry's broom steadied beneath him. He looked down, saw the snitch, a golden blur 30 feet below, hovering near the ground. He didn't think. He dove, nearly vertical, the wind tearing at his eyes, and Higgs gave chase but couldn't match the speed. And Harry's hand closed around the snitch just before the ground would have required him to pull up or accept the consequences. He hit the grass hard, tumbled, spat out a mouthful of turf, and stood up with the snitch clutched in his fist. The roar from the stands was physical, a wall of sound. Later, in the common room, after the celebrating had settled into comfortable noise, Hermione pulled Harry aside and told him what she'd seen. Snape's lips moving, the unbroken eye contact, the way it had stopped the moment his concentration broke. "He's after whatever's under that trapdoor," Harry said. "He's already been bitten trying to get past the dog. He must be getting desperate." Hermione looked at him steadily. "Harry, We need to find out what it is before he gets to it. Agreed. The library, then. We research, we follow the evidence. The spectacular brain Sirius wrote to McGonagall about, Harry said. Hermione blinked. He wrote to McGonagall? Apparently, she read it to Flitwick. You overheard. She went slightly pink. He's very proud of you. The warmth that settled in Harry's chest at that was something he'd stopped being surprised by and hadn't stopped being grateful for. Most students went home for Christmas. Harry stayed, partly because Ron stayed, partly because the library without the usual crowds was a genuine pleasure, and partly because the mystery under the third-floor corridor had taken up permanent residence in the back of his mind, and he wanted to make progress on it. The research wasn't going well. There's nothing, Hermione said, surrounded by stacks of books in the empty library. I've checked every reference to Hogwarts security measures, every historical record of significant magical artifacts, every account of objects valuable enough to require unusual protection. Nothing fits. Harry was lying on his back on the floor looking at the ceiling, which was his preferred position for thinking about things indirectly. Sirius had taught him that sometimes looking away from a problem was how you saw it clearly. We're probably looking in the wrong direction, he said. Dumbledore wouldn't hide just anything here. It has to be something with a specific reason for being at Hogwarts specifically, something that couldn't be kept safer anywhere else. Like what? Something that was already being kept somewhere else and had to be moved because someone tried to steal it. He sat up. Hermione, what did Hagrid say at Gringotts in July? When we saw him at the bank, Hermione's eyes went very wide. He said he was picking something up for Dumbledore from a high-security vault. He said it was Hogwarts business. And the day after we saw him, the Prophet reported a break-in at Gringotts, a vault that had been emptied that same day. They stared at each other. Whatever Dumbledore is protecting, Harry said slowly, he moved it from Gringotts to Hogwarts because someone had already tried to steal it. Someone who's still looking for it. Ron arrived at that moment carrying a parcel from home, pulling out Christmas jumpers, scarlet with a golden lion for Harry, maroon for himself, made by Mrs. Weasley, who had apparently decided that anyone who was friends with Ron was family enough to receive one. Harry looked at the jumper for a moment longer than the situation probably required. Something about it, the matter-of-factness of the gesture, being included without being asked whether he wanted to be included, caught him somewhere in the chest. That's, he started, and had to stop. That's really kind of her. She's like that, Ron said, with the fond exasperation of someone who has always had this and still understands somewhere that it's not nothing. Hagrid, Harry said, refocusing. We should talk to Hagrid. He was the one who picked it up. If we catch him in the right mood. After a few eggnogs, Hermione said, with the tone of someone reluctantly acquiring tactical knowledge. Exactly. Hagrid's hut smelled of wood smoke and whatever was in the pot on his fire, which was almost certainly inedible and steaming with enthusiasm anyway. He welcomed them in from the cold and poured himself what he claimed was just eggnog, while they settled around the table, and Harry waited for the right moment. It came after the second cup. Hagrid, Harry said, conversationally. That thing you picked up from Gringotts for Dumbledore, the high-security vault, that must have been important. Hagrid went carefully still. Can't talk about that. Top secret, that is. Between me and Dumbledore and Nicholas Flar, he stopped, looked genuinely horrified at himself. Nicholas Flamel, Hermione said, sitting up straighter. I never said nothing. Forget I said anything. Hagrid set down his cup with the deliberateness of someone trying to recover a situation that had already escaped. But Harry had already assembled it. The Philosopher's Stone. That's what's under the trapdoor. Flamel's stone. Hagrid went the color of old porridge. How do you know about the stone? It fits. The stone grants immortality. It produces the elixir of life, Someone would absolutely want to steal that, especially someone trying to come back from near death, someone like Voldemort. Hagrid flinched at the name. Don't say that name. And Snape's not. Professor Snape is a Hogwarts teacher. He's not after the stone. You three need to forget everything you just heard me say. They promised to forget. Harry had absolutely no intention of forgetting. Walking back to the castle through the snow, Hermione said, "If Voldemort is trying to use the stone to return to full power, then we need to make sure he doesn't get it before Dumbledore realizes what's actually happening," Harry said. Dumbledore must already know. Does he? He left for the Ministry this morning on what Snape probably told him was urgent business. Hermione's expression went through several things very quickly. You think Snape sent him away deliberately? I think it's possible. Harry, if you're right, then we need to be ready. He looked at both of them in the fading winter light. Not tonight, but soon. That night, Harry found a package in the dormitory with no note. Inside was fabric, silvery, impossibly light, sliding through his fingers like something between cloth and water. He threw it over his shoulders and looked in the mirror and saw his own floating head and nothing else. An invisibility cloak. He searched the folds and found a note, unsigned, in handwriting he recognized from his Hogwarts letter. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. Dumbledore. Harry held the cloak for a long time, feeling its weight, which was almost no weight at all, which felt significant in its own way. His father had worn this, had crept through Hogwarts under it, causing exactly the kind of trouble Sirius still referred to with unambiguous pride. And now it was Harry's. This is dangerous, Ron said, grinning from his bed. In every possible good way, Harry agreed. He used the cloak that night to explore, not for any specific purpose, just to see the castle as his father might have seen it, moving through it freely and invisibly, finding the places that didn't appear on any official map. He found the room on the third floor, not the restricted corridor, but an empty classroom, dusty and apparently unused, with a magnificent mirror standing in the center. Gold frame, ornate work at the edges, an inscription carved at the top that he puzzled at until he worked it out. I show not your face, but your heart's desire. He looked into it. His own reflection looked back, but not alone. Behind him stood two people he recognized from photographs. James Potter, tall and dark-haired and wearing glasses very like Harry's own, with one hand resting on Harry's shoulder and the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time for this. Lily Potter, red-haired and green-eyed and exactly as she looked in every photograph he had of her, smiling at him with a particular warmth that came through even in still images. And beside them, younger and lighter and without the weight they carried now, Sirius and Remus. All four marauders, whole and together and alive. And Harry, standing among them as if he'd always been there. He stayed for a long time, much longer than he meant to. When he finally walked back to the dormitory, his face was cold and wet, and he hadn't noticed when it had started. He went back the next night, and the night after that. On the third night, Dumbledore was already there, sitting on a desk near the mirror, eating a sherbet lemon, with the air of someone who had nowhere better to be. Back again, Harry. Harry stopped in the doorway. How did you know it was me? I didn't. I suspected you'd found the mirror. It has a particular draw for those who need it most. Dumbledore considered the mirror's surface with a thoughtful expression. Tell me what you see when you look into it. Harry hesitated. Then, my family, all of them together, my parents, Sirius and Remus, all of them alive and happy. The mirror of Erised shows us the deepest and most desperate desire of our hearts. Nothing more, nothing less. He paused. Men have wasted away before it, Harry, entranced by what they see, unable to stop looking at a reflection of something they can never reach. What do you see when you look into it? Myself, Dumbledore said pleasantly, holding a pair of thick woolen socks. One can never have enough socks. Harry knew this was not the truth, or not the whole truth. He didn't push. The mirror will be moved tomorrow, Dumbledore said. I'd ask you not to go looking for it again. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. He looked at Harry with the particular gravity he deployed when he wanted to be heard and not just listened to. You have a family who loves you, Harry. Sirius, Remus, the friends you've made this year. Don't lose them to grief over what you never had. I could have had it, Harry said, if Peter hadn't. Yes, Dumbledore said quietly, but he did, and no mirror changes that. He stood. Your parents died protecting you. They gave you life twice, once at birth and once through sacrifice. Honor that gift by living it, not by standing in empty rooms at midnight looking at reflections. Harry nodded. His throat was tight. You're very like your father, Dumbledore said, almost to himself. James understood things intellectually long before he accepted them emotionally. It was one of his most endearing qualities, and occasionally one of his most frustrating ones. He paused at the door. You are loved, Harry. The family you have is real. Choose the real one. The dragon was Hagrid's fault, in the way that several things that term were Hagrid's fault. Not through malice, but through the specific vulnerability of a man who loves dangerous things and finds it very hard to say no to an egg. He'd won it in a card game. A Norwegian ridgeback, rare, beautiful, kept in a wooden house by a man whose beard it singed twice in its first week. Norbert Hagrid called it, with the affection of someone naming a pet, rather than the caution of someone housing a fire-breathing reptile in a timber structure. Hagrid, Hermione said, on one of their visits, looking at the small dragon, currently the size of a large dog, growing daily, already breathing sparks with the enthusiasm of something discovering a new talent. You live in a wooden house. He's just a baby. He bit Ron. He was playing. Ron, nursing the bandaged hand that Madame Pomfrey had treated with the careful neutrality of someone who had learned not to ask questions, did not appear to share this interpretation. The solution came from Ron, specifically from the existence of his brother Charlie, who worked with dragons in Romania and who replied to their owl with the particular enthusiasm of someone offered a rescue case without needing to know the details. He arranged friends to collect Norbert from the astronomy tower at midnight on a given Saturday. All that was required was getting a growing dragon up there without anyone noticing. The plan was mostly successful. Norbert was collected. Charlie's friends vanished into the night sky with him. On the way back down, Harry dropped the invisibility cloak. Draco Malfoy, who had been out of bed for his own reasons that he hadn't advertised, picked it up. Well, Malfoy said, holding the silvery fabric up to the moonlight. Potter out of bed, with an invisibility cloak, my father will find that interesting. Give it back, or what? He smiled. We're not allowed magic in corridors. I'm taking this to Professor Snape. Something in Harry that had been patient all term made a quiet decision. You really want to do this? Try and stop me. Terran Telegra. Malfoy's legs began moving independently, and without his permission, a frantic jig that made him drop the cloak immediately. Harry picked it up. That's illegal, Malfoy gasped, still dancing. You used magic on a student. You'll be expelled, and you'll have to explain why you were out of bed to tell them about it. Harry cancelled the spell. Tell Snape. Tell anyone. You were out here too, Malfoy. We can both go down or neither of us does. Malfoy's face went through several things. He left without speaking, which was its own kind of answer. Walking back to Gryffindor Tower, Harry felt the unease of someone who has won a small thing at a cost they haven't fully calculated yet. Malfoy wouldn't forgive that. Malfoy would file it away and wait. Sirius would have been proud of the hex. Remus would have been disappointed by the escalation. Harry wasn't sure which opinion he cared more about, which itself felt like information. After that, Snape's treatment of Harry and potions acquired a new quality. Less the casual cruelty of someone using available opportunities and more the precise patient pressure of someone building toward something. Extra essays, detention for invented infractions, point deductions for the crime of existing in the wrong classroom. One day, Snape kept him after class. When the last student had filed out, the silence had the specific texture of a prepared space. Your father, Snape said softly, was an arrogant bully who tormented anyone he considered beneath him. He hexed students for entertainment, humiliated people publicly, and was loved for it because he was charming and wealthy and good at Quidditch. Everyone forgave James Potter everything because James Potter made it easy to forgive him. He paused. You are exactly like him. The same arrogance, the same assumption that rules don't apply to you. Harry said nothing. But unlike your father, you don't have his genuine talent to justify the ego. You're ordinary, Potter. Thoroughly, unremarkably ordinary. The sooner you accept that, the less painful the next 7 years will be. Harry felt the cold clarity settle in. Not absence of feeling. There was anger, there was hurt, there were things he wasn't going to let himself do with those feelings right now. What he felt clearly, underneath all of it, was calculation. Is that all, Professor? He asked. Snape's eyes narrowed. You think staying silent makes you mature. My name doesn't make me special, Harry said quietly. My parents' sacrifice does. And if you can't see the difference between those two things, that tells me more about you than it tells me about myself. Snape went very still. I'd like to go now, Harry said, unless there's something else. Get out of my classroom. Harry got out. He walked down the corridor at a steady pace and didn't look back. And he thought about Lily Potter and the specific grief of a man who had loved her and lost her and was now faced daily with the eyes she had passed to her son. It didn't make anything better, but understanding why someone hurts you is different from accepting that they should. The detention in the Forbidden Forest came eventually, inevitably, as punishments do when Malfoy has your name and access to Filch. Hagrid led them into the darkness with his crossbow and Fang whimpering at his heels. Something had been killing unicorns. 2 dead this month, their silver blood pooled and cooling on the forest floor. Unicorn blood kept a person alive even at the point of death, Hagrid explained, but at a cost that made that particular bargain monstrous. You slaughtered something pure and perfect, and you bought yourself time, and the time came at the price of something that couldn't be named precisely, but could be felt in the weight of what you'd done. They split up to search. Harry went with Hermione following a trail of silver deeper into the trees and found the unicorn in a clearing, white and still and very dead. Its blood spread across the grass in a pool that somehow still caught the moonlight. Standing over it, drinking from it, was something that barely maintained the shape of a human being. A hooded figure crouched over the body like something that had forgotten it was supposed to pretend. It raised its head, looked directly at Harry. Harry's scar split open with pain, so absolute it wasn't pain anymore. It was simply the entire contents of his skull. He fell. Hermione shouted something. The figure moved toward him, and the pain was everything. And then there were hoofbeats, crashing through the underbrush, and a centaur burst into the clearing. White, blonde, powerful, moving with the particular authority of something that belongs to the forest, rather than merely visiting it. The figure fled. The pain receded. Harry Potter. The centaur's voice was low and measured. You must leave the forest. This place is not safe for you. What was that thing? A creature that should not exist, one who sustains himself on the blood of the innocent, while he searches for something that will make him whole. The centaur's expression was grave. Voldemort is not gone. He is weakened. He is patient. And he is very close. Harry processed this. He'd known it. In the way you know things you've been told repeatedly by someone who was usually right. But knowing it in a cleared where a unicorn lay dead and a half form of the worst thing in the world had just looked at him was different from knowing it theoretically. The Philosopher's Stone, Hermione breathed. Perhaps, the centaur said. But what is coming is not your burden to carry. You are children. Let the adults. The adults, Harry said very quietly, aren't here. Back in Gryffindor Tower, Harry laid it out for Ron and Hermione. Voldemort, or what remained of him, was in the forest. He was drinking unicorn blood to keep himself going, while he waited for something that would fully restore him. Snape, or whoever was working with him, had probably sent Dumbledore away from Hogwarts deliberately. The stone was going to be taken tonight if they didn't do something. We should tell McGonagall, Hermione said. Tell her what? That we've been investigating the third-floor corridor for months, that we broke into the restricted section, that we've been asking Hagrid leading questions and accidentally got him to tell us about the stone. She'll give us detention and call Dumbledore, and by the time Dumbledore gets back, it'll be gone, Ron finished. We have to go ourselves, Harry said. Tonight. Hermione looked at him for a long moment. You know that's an insane thing to say. Yes, and you're saying it anyway. My dad would have. Sirius would have. I'm not going to let Voldemort come back because I was too sensible to do the obvious stupid brave thing. Another moment. Then, I'm in, Ron said. Hermione closed her eyes briefly. So am I. But, Harry, we need a plan. We can't just run at it. What do we know about the defenses? They spent what remained of the evening preparing. Hermione compiled everything she'd read. Ron worked through chess strategy. Harry thought about Sirius's training. Assess your environment, identify what each obstacle needs, use what you have. Work together. At midnight, they met in the common room, under the invisibility cloak. Harry had the flute Sirius had taught him years ago. Hermione had her wand and her knowledge. Ron had his instincts and his chess. Last chance, Harry said. Don't be dramatic, Ron said. Let's go. The third-floor corridor was dark and silent in the way that places are silent when something large is sleeping in them. Harry opened the door carefully, fluffy. All three heads of him filled the room with the particular density of something that has never needed to worry about predators and has built its entire existence around that fact. Three enormous heads, three sets of jaws, three slow rhythmic snores that moved the dust on the flagstones, and beneath the vast weight of the creature's paws, the trap-door. Harry raised the flute to his lips and played. A simple tune, something Sirius had taught him when he was 6 years old, and asking why music existed, one of those quiet afternoons at Grimmauld Place, before the world had complicated things. The melody was nothing remarkable, but Fluffy's eyes began to droop almost immediately, the three heads swaying in unison, and within 2 minutes the snoring had deepened into something that had nothing to do with awareness. Now, Harry said. They heaved the trapdoor open and dropped through into darkness. They landed on something soft and green and immediately alive. Devil's Snare. Harry recognized it from herbology, the way it tightened around you when you struggled. The way it responded to the panic it caused with more tightening, a plant that had evolved to exploit the instinct that made it dangerous. Stop moving, Hermione said sharply. Both of you, stop. They went still. The plant slowed. It hates light. Lumos solem, the light that burst from her wand was bright and hot, and the devil's snare recoiled from it with a speed that suggested genuine feeling. They dropped through into the next chamber, landing on a stone floor, and stood up to find the air full of wings. Hundreds of keys, all sizes, flying through the space in an agitated mass. One lock on one door across the chamber. Somewhere in the swarm, one silver key with a slightly bent wing. 3 brooms. Harry was on one before he'd consciously decided, in the air in seconds, scanning. The keys scattered and regrouped. He tracked the bent wing, spotted it, lost it, found it again near the ceiling. cut off its retreat, closed his hand around it in a motion so practiced it was barely a thought. The door opened. The next chamber was a giant chessboard, the pieces the size of small ponies, all of them watching the three of them with the expressionless attention of things waiting to be told what to do. Ron walked to the edge of the board and stood there for a moment, with his head slightly tilted. Harry had seen him do this before. The particular stillness of someone who is not looking at the surface of a thing, but at the structure underneath it. "This is chess," Ron said quietly, almost to himself. "I can do chess." He looked at Harry. "You're a bishop. Hermione, castle. I'll take knight. Ron. I know what I'm doing. Trust me." They trusted him. The match took 15 minutes, and it was, Harry thought, the most extraordinary thing he'd ever watched. Ron, moving them across the board with the calm authority of someone who'd been doing this since he was small enough to need a step to reach the table. Sacrificing pieces with the ruthless precision of a general who understood that winning required losses. The opposing pieces were enormous, and they moved with genuine force, and every time one of them took a Gryffindor piece, the sound it made was the kind of sound that settled in your chest. When the moment came, Ron looked at Harry with an expression that had no drama in it, just clarity. "I have to let the Queen take me. It's the only line that gives you checkmate." He paused. "When I'm gone, 3 squares left. That's all." "Ron, don't. It's chess, Harry. This is how you win chess." He moved his knight into position. "Go." The White Queen moved. The sound it made when it struck Ron was not something Harry was going to think about right now. Ron went down and didn't move. Hermione made a sound. "Is he? He's breathing," she said, her voice controlled in the specific way that meant she was controlling it deliberately. "He's unconscious. He's breathing." Harry looked at him for a moment. Then he moved 3 squares left. The opposing king looked at its position, considered it, and threw down its sword. The pieces cleared. "Stay with him," Harry said. Hermione was already kneeling beside Ron, her wand out, her face set with the expression she wore when she was being useful, because it was the only thing left to be. "Go, Harry, go." He went. The corridor beyond the chess room was narrow and cold and smelled of something he didn't want to identify. A door at the end of it. Harry pushed through and stopped. The room beyond held the mirror of Erased, standing where Dumbledore had presumably placed it as the final protection, its gold frame catching the light from torches on the walls. And standing in front of it, studying his own reflection with frustrated concentration, was Professor Quirrell. The stutter was gone. So was the nervous energy, the anxious hovering, the general impression of a man perpetually worried about something just off stage. What remained when you removed all of that was something considerably colder. "Potter." He said it without turning around. "I wondered when you'd arrive." "You," Harry said. "Not Snape." "Snape." Quirrell laughed, a real laugh, nothing performed about it. "Snape has been trying to protect you all term. He suspected me from the beginning, the interfering fool. Nearly caught me in the forest when I was sustaining myself on the unicorn blood." He turned now, and his expression was the mild pleasantness of someone who no longer needed to pretend. "The troll on Halloween was mine. A distraction. I needed access to the third-floor corridor, and Snape was watching the door. Your friends dealt with the troll rather more effectively than I'd anticipated. Impressive for first years." Harry's hand moved toward his wand. "I wouldn't." Quirrell's own wand was already out. "This isn't a duel you can win. I've been practicing dark magic since before you could read." He turned back to the mirror. "The problem is this. I can see myself giving the stone to my master. I can see the moment of his return, but I cannot work out how to get it out." "Let me try," said a voice. Harry had heard that voice before, in nightmares and in the forest and in the first year and a half of his life that he didn't remember, but that had shaped everything afterward. High and cold, and without any of the warmth that human voices carry, even when they're angry. Quirrell reached up and unwrapped his turban. On the back of his head, where the back of a head should be, was a face, flat and pale, with red eyes and slits where a nose should have been. It was the face of something that had decided very early that being human was a limitation worth discarding. Harry Potter, it said. The boy who lived. How fitting that you'll be here when I return. Could not think. This was the thing that had killed his parents, that had stood in the nursery in Godric's Hollow and pointed a wand at Lily Potter, and chosen to do what it did. This was the face behind everything, behind Sirius's grief and Remus's isolation, and 12 years of a wizarding world that had spent a decade recovering from what one person had decided to do with their power. It was smaller than he'd imagined, stranger, more wrong. Come here, boy. Look into the mirror. Tell me what you see. Harry approached, not because he was obeying, but because refusing seemed pointless, and because there was something stirring in his chest that he recognized from training. Not courage exactly, not yet, but its precursor. The moment before you decide, he looked into the mirror. His reflection smiled at him. A real smile, slightly conspiratorial, the kind James Potter probably wore when he'd thought of something. The reflection reached into its pocket, produced a blood-red stone, winked, and put the stone back. Harry felt a weight appear in his own pocket that hadn't been there before. The stone. The mirror had given it to him, because he wanted to find it but not use it, wanted to stop it from being taken, not to take it himself. The protection Dumbledore had built worked exactly as intended, and it had worked for Harry. Well? Voldemort demanded. What do you see? Harry thought very quickly. I see myself winning the House Cup. Gryffindor's ahead of Slytherin by 40 points. He lies. The red eyes narrowed. I can see it in him. Seize him. Quirrell lunged. His hands closed around Harry's arm and he screamed. A sound of genuine pain, immediate and total, and when he pulled his hands back, the skin was blistering where it had made contact, smoke rising from his palms. He stared at them with the expression of someone whose understanding of the world has just been revised without their consent. What is this magic? Love, Harry said. He understood it now with the clarity of something that had always been true and had just become visible. My mother died for me. That's in my blood. Your master can't touch me without being burned by it. Love. Voldemort's voice carried a contempt so deep it had become its own kind of certainty. The thing that makes you small. It's not weakness. Harry's hand closed around the stone in his pocket, smooth and warm and impossibly light. My mother died rather than step aside. Sirius chose me when he could have walked away. Remus stayed when staying cost him everything. My friends came down here tonight knowing they might not come back. He met the red eyes steadily. That's not weakness. That's the only kind of strength that actually means anything. Fool, Voldemort said. Fool. Bring him to me. Make him touch the mirror. Make him... Quirrell came at him again, desperate now, past strategy and into pure motion. Harry did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed Quirrell's face with both hands, and the effect was instantaneous. Quirrell screamed, and the scream didn't stop, and Harry held on because letting go seemed worse, and the pain in his scar was a white roar, and Voldemort was shrieking. And then there was a dark smoke, a presence abandoning a body that was no longer useful, streaming past Harry like cold water, and gone. Quirrell collapsed. Harry stood over him for a moment, swaying, then remembered the stone. He pulled it from his pocket and looked at it, red and heavy and worth more grief than he could calculate. Then he thought about what Dumbledore had built the mirror protection to do, and he thought about what Flamel had said about death being like going to sleep after a very long day, and he made a decision. He placed the stone against the mirror's surface. It passed through without resistance, absorbed without sound, gone. Harry's legs stopped working. He was unconscious before he hit the floor. He woke 3 days later to Sirius Black sitting beside his bed, looking like a man who had decided sleep was optional and then discovered it wasn't. Harry. The relief in his voice was so large it barely fit in the word. Oh, thank God. Harry, you're awake. Sirius. His own voice came out rough and strange. What are you doing here? Dumbledore sent word that you'd been injured stopping a professor from stealing an incredibly powerful magical artifact. Sirius's jaw was tight. What did you think I was going to do? Stay home and wait? I'm fine. You were unconscious for 3 days. Madame Pomfrey said you'd pushed yourself to magical exhaustion. That's not fine, Harry. That is specifically the opposite of fine. Voldemort was about to come back and nobody else was stopping him. That is not your job. You're 11 years old. I was the only one who could get the stone. The mirror, it was protected so only someone who wanted to find it without using it could retrieve it. I was the only person there who fit that description. It had to be me. Sirius closed his eyes. He sat like that for a moment, and Harry watched the particular struggle of a person trying to reconcile being furious and being proud and being terrified, all of which were equally true at the same time. You're exactly like your father, Sirius said finally. James would have done the same thing. It would have terrified me just as much then. Are you angry? I'm furious. I'm proud. I'm terrified. He laughed, slightly unsteadily. I'm a mess, Harry. That's what you've made me. Sorry. No, you're not. No, Harry admitted. Not entirely. Sirius reached over and gripped his hand. I saw him, Voldemort, possessing Quirrell. He's not gone, Sirius. He's out there somewhere. I know. Dumbledore told me everything. Sirius's expression darkened with something complicated. He'll come back someday. We've always known he would. But Harry, next time. Next time you tell an adult, you don't face him alone. I wasn't alone. Ron and Hermione came with me. That doesn't make it better. It does to me. Sirius looked at him for a long moment. Then he sighed, deeply, from somewhere fundamental. You're going to give me grey hair before I'm 30. You already have grey hair. That's from raising you. But the corner of his mouth was doing something. Is Ron all right? Broken ribs, but Madame Pomfrey fixed them. He woke up yesterday and immediately asked about you. The hospital wing doors opened, and Harry looked up to find Hermione and Ron coming through them at speed. Hermione's been here every day. Hermione reached his bed first and hugged him before he could say anything, the fierce, brief hug of someone who has been worried past the point of managing it elegantly. You've been unconscious for 3 days. We were so worried. Don't do that again. I'll try. What happened after I fainted? Harry asked. Dumbledore arrived, Ron said, dropping into the chair on the other side of the bed. Found you with Quirrell's body. Said you'd done something incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. That sounds like Dumbledore. The stone's been destroyed, Hermione said. Dumbledore and Flamel decided it was too dangerous to exist. Flamel has enough elixir stored to settle his affairs. And then she paused. Dumbledore said it's like going to sleep after a very long day. For someone who's lived 600 years, Harry thought about that, about his parents who had died at 21, about Sirius sitting beside his bed, with grey at his temples that hadn't been there before Harry came into his life, about all the versions of a future that had been lost, and the one that remained. I think I understand that, he said quietly. The end-of-year feast was held with Slytherin substantially ahead on points, mostly because Snape had spent an entire year treating point allocation as a tool for personal expression. The green and silver banners hung from the ceiling with the authority of something already settled. Dumbledore rose to speak. Another year has passed. He looked around the hall with the particular attention of someone who is genuinely interested in every face in it. And while I could simply award the House Cup to Slytherin on the basis of current totals, The Slytherin table cheered with the enthusiasm of people who had been waiting all year for this. I believe some final additions are in order. The hall went very quiet. To Miss Hermione Granger, for cool logic in the face of fire, 50 points to Gryffindor. Hermione went the color of the Gryffindor banners. The table erupted. To Mr. Ronald Weasley, for the most distinguished game of chess this school has seen in many years, 50 points. Ron looked like someone had just told him something he wasn't sure he was allowed to believe. To Mr. Harry Potter for pure nerve and outstanding courage, 60 points. The hall was noise, pure physical noise. Dumbledore raised one hand. And finally, because it requires a great deal of bravery to stand up to one's enemies, but a great deal more to stand up to one's friends when it is necessary. 10 points to Neville Longbottom. Neville Longbottom looked like a man experiencing a fundamental revision of his self-understanding. He gripped the edge of the table with both hands as the people around him erupted. Dumbledore smiled, which means Gryffindor wins the House Cup. The red and gold banners fell from the ceiling. The noise became something you could feel in your chest. Harry grinned at Ron, who was still slightly stunned, and at Hermione, who was crying and pretending not to be, and felt something that he didn't have an immediate word for, something that had to do with having been part of something real, with having done something that mattered, with being 11 years old and already understanding that the people around you were worth anything. Platform 9 3/4 on the return was the particular beautiful chaos of an ending. Trunks and owls and families reuniting. The Hogwarts Express gleaming red in the afternoon light. The smell of steam and summer beginning. Harry said goodbye to Hermione, who extracted promises of letters from both of them with the focused efficiency she brought to everything, and to Ron, who was immediately absorbed into the red-haired, loud, laughing mass of the Weasley family with the ease of someone returning to their natural habitat. Mrs. Weasley hugged Harry before he could evade it, solid and warm, and without any of the awkwardness that might have been there. "You take care of yourself, dear," she said firmly, "and you're welcome at the Burrow any time at all." "Thank you, Mrs. Weasley." Then Sirius was there, pushing through the crowd with Remus a step behind him, and his face when he spotted Harry was the face of someone who had spent a week being very brave about something and was now allowed to stop. "There's our hero," Sirius said, and pulled him into a hug that lasted longer than the platform crowd probably required. Harry didn't point this out. "Ready to go home?" Sirius asked, against the top of his head. So ready. Harry meant it in several directions at once. No offense to Hogwarts. None taken. It gave you back in one piece, which is about all I asked. Remus hugged him too. Less dramatic, equally real. You did well this year, Harry, in every sense. I had good training. You had good instincts. The training was just there to give the instincts something to work with. They moved through the crowd toward the barrier. Harry looked back once, at the express, at the platform, at the place where he'd spent the year becoming something more than he'd been when he arrived. He'd learned real magic. He'd made friends who would follow him into the dark without being asked twice. He'd looked Voldemort in the face and come home. He couldn't wait to come back. At the barrier, with the ordinary muggle noise of King's Cross beginning to filter through, Harry stopped walking. Sirius, yeah, he found he wanted to say it precisely, the way Sirius had always taught him to say important things, directly, without burying it in other words. For raising me. For teaching me everything you thought I'd need. For staying up at 3 in the morning when I was teething, apparently, even though I don't remember it. For the leather jacket. He paused. For choosing me. Sirius had gone very still. The platform noise continued around them, and he stood in it like something anchored. "I chose you," he said finally, "because you were James's son and Lily's son, and because, when I held you in that nursery, it was the only thing that made sense to do." "But Harry," He crouched down slightly so they were level, which he'd stopped doing around Harry's 8th birthday and apparently felt was warranted now. You have to understand, every day since then, I have thanked whatever's listening that I made that choice. Not because it was the right thing to do, because of who you turned out to be. He cleared his throat. You're my son. That's all you'll ever be. And I love you more than I know how to say in a train station. Harry threw his arms around him and didn't care about the train station at all. Remus joined the hug without comment, which was its own kind of eloquence. The three of them stood on the platform with the ordinary world moving around them. Commuters, pigeons, the smell of diesel, the announcement of a delayed train to Edinburgh, and Harry felt the thing settle in his chest that had been settling slowly all year, like something finding its correct position after a long time, slightly off-center. Not peace, exactly. He knew too much about what was coming for it to be simply peace. Voldemort was out there. The prophecy existed. More danger was waiting in the years ahead with the patience of something that had all the time it needed. But today was not that day. Today was the last day of his first year, and he was standing in a train station with the two people who had built him into whoever he was, and whatever was coming could wait. They walked through the barrier together. The boy who had been left in a nursery in Godric's Hollow had become something more specific, not just the boy who lived, a label that had always belonged to other people's stories about him rather than to anything he'd felt from the inside. But Harry Potter, son of James and Lily, godson of Sirius Black, part of a family that had been assembled not from blood but from choice, repeated daily over 11 years. The Marauder's Prince. Not a title anyone had given him, but one he was growing into regardless. Shaped by stories and photographs and 3 in the morning conversations in a kitchen that smelled of whatever Remus had been making. By toy broomsticks and leather jackets and a mirror that showed him what he wanted most, and a father who had shown him how to want the right things instead. He would go back to Hogwarts in September. He would face what came after that and after that and after that, because that was the shape of the life he'd been given, and he had no intention of wasting it. But first, home. The black front door of number 12, Grimmauld Place, with its tarnished knocker and its complicated history, and the portrait behind the curtains that would scream at them when they came through the hall, and Creature muttering in the kitchen, and the drawing-room floor still faintly marked where Harry's toy broom had been flown too fast into the skirting board at age 2, and the smell of old magic, and recent cooking, and the specific combination of two people who had made an unlikely place into something that deserved to be called home. Sirius pushed the door open, stood back to let Harry go in first, the way he always did. Harry stepped inside.